Hello and welcome Exiles to my Essence Drain Lich build guide. This character offers a moderate amount of defense with the sheer amount of energy shield the Lich can acquire. On top of that, it also offers a very satisfying, that feels right sort of thing when it comes to spreading your Essence Drain from pack to pack, leaving a trail of chaos behind on the battlefield. Now let's get into this character point by point. Welcome Exiles to the guide for the Essence Drain Lich. It's been a week of trial and error testing a lot of things, and I'm going to give you a rundown on passives, gearing, skills choice suggestion, the works. We're going to try to be very comprehensive with this, and hopefully by the end of it you have a good idea how to make it yourself and what adjustments you can make for your own personal preferences. First things first, we have done now a written guide on the character, which will be linked in the description below, which covers basically skill choices, your passive tree progression from level basically 13 all the way to level 93, which is what my current character has. You can level it further beyond this. Ascendancy choices all the way through the first lab to the fourth lab, the gearing choices, which is going to give you stat priority. And one thing I want to highlight about this that you cannot pass up is for each of these gearing pieces, I do a weighted sum search. What this essentially does is it gives you an idea of how to search for weapons that are good for your build. You'll see if you click the show filters button over here, there's a weighted sum number. Essentially how all of these work, it's for every single gear slot. I have these set up. You basically adjust this number, make the number higher when you want to make upgrades. For example, 800 is going to show you much better weapons than if you search for 400. And technically, you can also do something funny like, for example, say, hey, my budget is one divine orb. I'm gonna say max, show me one divine orb max. What happens if I search for the highest value within one divine orb? And this will show up. There's a one divine item which has over 140% damage and plus 4. That's a pretty good wand. That's the sort of thing you're going to be using this for, is simply to give yourself targeted upgrades for the build. And it's on every single one of these gear slots. Can highly recommend. This is what you should be doing when you're looking for gear upgrades, is adjusting those things. One small note I want to make: for the energy shield gear pieces, the body armor, the boots, and the gloves, for each of these gear pieces, you'll notice it says that I also recommend adjusting the minimum energy shield number. Now, this weighted sum, it can tell you the value of basically the stats that aren't giving you energy shield. For energy shield itself, you're going to have to adjust this minimum number here, because that's what ends up being the thing that makes you get to X amount of ES. 1,000 energy shield chest piece is going to give you twice as much ES as a 500 energy shield chest piece. So when you're upgrading, I would suggest changing this number more than changing this number for those specific pieces. Now, aside from that stuff, can I go back here? Yes, I can. All right, sweet. We have the Atlas passives suggestions for those of you who want to have a tree recommendation to follow. Personally, I would say Atlas Choices is all about playing what mechanics you like. I have a tree set up for doing shrines and strong boxes here, and maybe a little bit of chance for rogue exiles. Ultimately, I tried out quite a few different things between essences, the Asmiri's wisps, explicit modifier multiplier, just like a tree that was fully invested in that stuff. And I didn't really feel like it was too much more profit to do one strategy over the other, so I would just say pick a strategy that you actually enjoy. For example, clicking shrines means you get to click the acceleration shrine and make your character go faster more often. And for me, I think that would be fun, and that's probably what I would end up settling on, is what I'm suggesting here. Ultimately, I think it comes down to personal preference, so make the choice as you will. Then we have an FAQ section here, basically answering all the common questions that I get. If I get more asked questions on stream, I will try to add to this list. Ultimately, if there's something that you can't find an answer to, come by stream, ask me, and I will try to give you an answer on it. Usually, I can do decently at that. Sometimes I'm a little bit burnt out on questions, so I apologize if I don't always do the best at answering. That's on me. And then next up, there will be basically the link to this video here. Right now, it has our day number 7 update, but I will be swapping that after this video post. And a summary on the character, which is basically, it's Essence Drain, it's Contagion. Keep it simple, stupid, have a good time. 2-button, Essence Drain Contagion, watch it spread among the crowd. Now, I have a lot of things I want to go over today, which are going to include leveling suggestions, gearing more specifically, going over skill choice options, all those sorts of things. There will be in the description of this video, or not the description of this video, but in the bar, there will be live stamps for the various portions of the video where I cover information. Now, let's start off with leveling. First things first, you start off in the campaign. How soon do you get to be playing the build? Essentially level 6. That's when you can equip a level 3 gem. You get your first level 3 gem at the Red Veil when you fight the Rust King. This is when you can swap into Essence Drain plus Contagion and start just playing that as your main setup. It's pretty simple. And then you want to expand and follow along with the skill suggestions that are in the planner section. They're also in the written guide, basically saying, hey, I have Essence Drain. I start out with a 3-link. You could start out with Essence Drain plus considered casting, or I would also suggest keep in mind maybe doing chain early on. I like it for clear personally to use chain, and then every time I got an additional link, I would add one of the other damage links suggested here. Same thing with all these other links. Ultimately, it's just a matter of as you get the extra sockets to link in more things, and as you run into a skill gem where you can cut the new gem, for example, you don't start out with the ability to cut, let's say, Despair. This is like a level 9 curse or something like that. Once you get a level 9 gem for it, that's when you would cut the gem for it. And then when you get more support gems, that's when you add in the various focus curse, heightened curse, inspiration, stuff like that. Now, outside of just gem progression, let's talk about gear progression. I would heavily encourage you, if you find Exalt Orbs, do not use them for the purpose of slamming on your items. Exalt Orbs are money, and a lot of these basically strong power items for the character, like plus level 1, plus level amulet, plus level focus, you can buy those for 1 Exalt, 2 Exalt. There's a lot of very good cheap items on trade. Keep an eye out for when you get your first Exalts and just buy plus level items. I would say progression wise, Act 1, buy yourself a +1 wand with percent damage if you can, a +1 focus if you can, and a +1 amulet. That should carry you all the way to Act 2, Act 3, at which point I would suggest looking for a +2 focus, looking for a +2 amulet, and looking for a +2 or 3 wand. That'll carry you all to the end game, the end of the campaign, at which point start looking for increasing your levels once again. Ultimately, if you're wondering to yourself, how do I increase damage? There's not a lot of damage sources. It's pretty much just percent damage and gem levels. Those are the two things you want to continuously be upgrading throughout your progression, as well as making sure you're constantly leveling up your Essence Drain to the level that you can with your character. I'll give you an example. When you start out in maps, you don't really start dropping like a level 16 or 17 gems until you're like in yellow tier maps or whatever, but you might get to level 72, for example, very fast, which is like a level 17 uncut gem. It could be worth it to go buy that uncut gem to then progress your damage up and ramp it up much faster. That covers basically the leveling progression for damage. Now, when it comes to defense, you will notice that on this tree we have suggested here, you will see that I start out as well, initially we're just rushing the percent damage nodes, but when we get to level 35, you'll notice we go over inspect mind over matter. This is in combination with grabbing mana regen nodes here, and Soulless Form. The reason we're doing this is initially when you're in the campaign, there's not a lot of ways to get tank other than just getting some raw EHP. And part of getting some raw EHP is what if all your mana you had throughout the leveling progression to this point could also be AHP. And I would suggest you want to make sure you level up your mana flask appropriately, like basically just keep picking up and upgrading to the new flask based on your level. And this is supposed to carry you to the end of the campaign. Keep in mind, Mind Over Matter does give you a 50% less mana recovery rate multiplier to your sustain. This is one of those things where it'll make your mana sustain feel tricky, feel a little bit rough, and it's just supposed to bridge the gap between when you get energy shield gear and when you don't have it, because initially you're going to be pretty squishy in that in-between phase, and if you don't drop good energy shield gear throughout the campaign, this is the reason to do that. Ultimately, if you're leveling a second character and you can buy some like decent leveling gear throughout, you don't need to do this. But this is what I did on my league start, and basically when we start out, which was a pseudo SSF run initially before items became available to buy and before we had any currency to buy anything. This is what I did, and that's what it's for. It's just to bridge the gap between when we're an energy shield build and when we're initially a life-based character with not a lot of life on gear. If that makes sense, that's what that's for. So defensively, that's what we're doing essentially till about the end of the campaign, around level 60, 70-ish. Once you get, I'd say, at least about 2k energy shield, at that point, I think it's justifiable. Swap out of Mind Over Matter, swap out of those mana regen nodes. You shouldn't need those anymore, and invest into a lot of the ES nodes on the tree, like this wheel here, and eventually you'll be going for the one up here. So that's what the tree progression is for. That covers the defensive progression. It's mostly about pick up gear with res and life on it as you go, buy yourself some damage items, grab Mind Over Matter early, and then swap to ES gear when you're getting towards the tail end of the campaign, and you can get a couple thousand ES from gear pieces, and eventually Adziri's Disdain will be a big defensive upgrade for you. So that covers the defenses and the offensive progression of leveling and just leveling in general. Hopefully that makes sense. Cutting this in because I forgot to go over it. Ascendancy choices. What's the order of the nodes we take and why are we taking certain things? So we start off with taking Soulless Form. This is just giving you a big boost to mana sustain early. It allows you to do Mind Over Matter in the basically level 30 to level 60 portion of the campaign before you get some energy shield gear. And then after that, for your second node, it would be nice to take Eternal Life, but the thing is Eternal Life is only good if you have the energy shield gear to back it up, where you've swapped out of Mind Over Matter. If you want to get it earlier, your second lab, you can get as early as Act 3, which means what do you take? I would suggest the Jewel Socket if you can get an okay Jewel Socket to put in there. That will work a lot better for you if you don't have the ability to swap into ES that early, because that's just raw power, and Eternal Life doesn't really give you much value until you become a primary energy shield build. Now that being said, the third node, Eldritch Empowerment, this is something you want to grab once you become an ES build as well, which is a good damage multiplier. I would generally grab this as the third ascendancy point and leave the Jewel Socket for last. But again, unless you have the ability to have permanent, like good uptime of your energy shield rate, like you have good recharge nodes, this node itself will end up bricking your character. Like if you click this as like your first or one of your early labs, you spend all your ES down, or you get hit by a little bit of damage and it removes your ES, because initially you start out with mostly just life as your main defensive layer. That will stop you from casting. So keep that in mind. There is a brick scenario there. And then lastly, we go with the Jewel Socket. Now, originally when I started this character out, I did try Rupture the Soul for my fourth lab. I felt like the Explode felt decently fun, but ultimately from my playtest, after playing with it more and looking at it a little bit more closely, I believe Rupture the Soul bricks Contagion chains. What I mean by that is there's Monster A, Monster B, and Monster C. And from my experience, what ends up happening with this Explode node is you Essence Drain Contagion Monster A, and what can happen is Monster A can blow up, kill this Monster B with the explosion, and then the Contagion, which would have gone from A to B to C, no longer gets to Monster C. So I think it kind of bricks your Contagion chains. I think it ultimately hurts your clear overall. It is kind of poppy. It is kind of fun to have it kill like a rare monster if there's a bunch of monsters around it that blow up. But at the same time, I think it hurts your clear. Try it out for yourself and see what you think. But that's my personal suggestion. As for the other options on this tree, I just don't think they're very good. The Power Charge node requires some bad quality of life fortune in Power Charge generation. I wouldn't do that. And then the other nodes, Unholy Might doesn't work with Essence Drain because gain damage only applies to the hit-based portion of the damage. It does not apply to the dot portion of Essence Drain, so it doesn't give you the damage you might think it does. And then outside of that, additional curse, hexproof enemies, you're forcing in losing other good nodes to get there. And Black and Heart, really, we don't have the mana investment to make value out of that. So that's the Ascendancy points. I'm just cutting that in because I forgot to go over it. Now let's talk about skill choice and support gem choice. These are questions I get all the time, and I figure it should be worth going in depth. Essence Drain, links. The best link, in my opinion, is links like Swift Affliction, links like Considered Casting, and after that, it gets a little bit quasi in terms of what's good to use. I usually like using Chain pretty much all the time because it helps with the clear of consistency, being able to have Essence Drain proc on a Contagion enemy. Sometimes there's a little bit of like, this is hard to make them target the same thing. I'll give you some examples. Let's say I shoot Essence Drain out. There's a chance that the enemy will die before I manage to cast Contagion on it, in which case you don't get the Contagion spread. So the idea is if I have Chain, I shoot this out, there's a delay where it bounces between two additional enemies, and it is much more likely the Contagion will be in time to proc on an enemy to then hit the enemy that has Essence Drain and spread throughout and kill the entire pack. Another point is, let's say I Contagion the enemy, but my Essence Drain misses and hits an enemy over here. The upside of Chain is it'll hit that enemy and then bounce to the enemy that has Contagion on it. It's just to allow for the situations where you'd miss the target to still get the Contagion Essence Drain going on enemies. Ultimately, it does hurt your single target because it hurts some of the hit-based damage portion of the skill. This tooltip is your hit damage. So for example, it cuts it in half. But the thing that matters is the primary damage we care about is actually not our hit-based damage at all. It's really our dot, and it doesn't hurt that. So it's just a quality of life thing. After those primary links, there is links that you can try different uses for. Intense Agony is if you inflict it on the enemy and the enemy just dies in one hit, fantastic damage link. If it's going to be a prolonged boss fight, then this link loses value. So for example, I like Intense Agony for generic mapping situations. Most bosses we can kill in around 5 to 10 seconds, I would say, and you get full value out of it. Whereas if I'm doing like a T4 Arbiter, a very chunky, dangerous boss where you're gonna have to dodge a lot and you're gonna have to redo your Intense Agony, that is a case where you'd swap this out. And when it comes to swapping out single target, Intense Agony and Chain, I like to swap for Drain Ailments and Deliberation. Drain Ailments can also be interchanged with Zenith potentially if you have enough mana sustain to consistently be above that 90% when you go to cast, but when you get high gem levels, the mana sustain gets pretty hard to do. For the most part, my character, I just played with this Essence Drain Chain plus Chaos Mastery, and then I didn't usually swap these in until doing hard endgame bosses, but you can decide that for yourself. The point is, find something that works for you. Personally, I felt I needed the chain to be this consistently feels good in maps versus not. If you find you can consistently do Essence Drain and without having issues on the single target, you can make that call for yourself. Then next up, we have Contagion links. Now, Contagion's all about quality of life and clear. So we have Magnified AoE, which makes the spread of the Contagion be more effective to spread to a farther target. Then we have Arcane Tempo, which means we can cast it faster, so it's an easier 2-button proc, which makes you move faster throughout maps. And then we have Unleash, and then lastly, Hinder. Now, you can start trying to add in extra damage links if you want. For example, let's say you wanted Intense Agony over here, which would work well with Contagion. Then you could maybe pop Deliberation or Drain Ailments, something like that on here more permanently. That's your call. But I went for full utility. And the reason we have Unleash, in case you're wondering, is it will proc on additional enemies. Let's say that these three, the Well, Doriani, and Alva, are all enemies. Unleash, if I cast over here, will then proc on 2 additional enemies, which means, let's say I hit an enemy over here with Essence Drain, it can bounce back and hit this enemy, which wasn't the primary target of the Contagion, and it'll still work. That's why we're running Unleash there. It does add a more significant mana multiplier, but that's the reason for it. And then Hinder just slows enemies down. You put that on a boss, it's going to make them move slower. It's a little bit of utility. Ultimately, if you want, you can force in more DPS to Contagion. I did at one point try a leveled up Contagion to see if it could clear monsters by itself, but it was just a bit too slow. The thing about Contagion is it's very expensive mana-wise, so you're going to have to play around that depending on how much sustain you get in your build, which is contingent on your flat life and your mana regen rate, and this will affect whether or not you could sustain a higher level Contagion cast. I personally have a level 2 Contagion here, just trying to limit the mana cost so it doesn't cost me too much mana to cast. If I had a level 21 Contagion here, it would eat like half my mana pool. It would be like a 500 mana cost. So bear that in mind when you're trying to decide about whether or not you want to make your Contagion do some damage or not. I felt it was worth it just to keep it low mana cost, and thus I didn't eat all my mana casting it. Next up, we have Withering Presence. This you want to link with Persistence and Clarity. Persistence basically makes the withers you inflict last longer. For example, on the tooltip here, we have a 14-second wither duration, which means with just our Withering Presence inflicting a wither every 1.4 seconds, it will take them fully to max stacks. Just throughout the fight, you'll see 5% chaos damage, 10% chaos, 15% chaos, 20% chaos damage taken. You'll see this little purple icon with a percentage next to it counting up, and that's the enemy taking more and more chaos damage. And then eventually, when you get wither effect on the tree, that'll go all the way up to 70% increased wither damage taken, or chaos damage taken due to wither. After Contagion, Essence Drain, Wither, these are basically your mainstay primary stuff that you get in Act 1, which will carry you through the campaign. Then you start looking at things like Despair, a level 9 gem, which is all about improving our damage on single target. You don't really use it in maps, but when you get to a tanky rare that's really like juiced, or a boss and you want to deal more single target, that's what this is for. Subtracting the enemy's res makes them take more damage, and it's a big multiplier. We have Heightened Curse for curse magnitude, Focus Curse, and Inspiration. Despair can get pretty expensive, so I would recommend keeping this a little bit lower level. If you find you feel like you can level it up more, then you'll get more damage out of it. I limited it to level 10. You're going to have to gauge that based on how much mana sustain you fit into your character as you progress it. But this is all about making the enemy take increased damage. And this brings us to the first point. When it comes to skills, we have weapon sets. If you look over on this bar, there is a bar, weapon set 1, weapon set 2. Contagion, Acid Strain, these are all weapon set 1. Withering Presence, weapon set 1. And then Despair is weapon set 2. And this is why our tree has green passives and red passives. If you look at the tree and you're wondering why green, why red passives, the reason is we are snapshotting the power of all these nodes. These are a bunch of nodes that basically scale the power of curses. And with the weapon sets set to 2, when I cast my curse, it'll automatically swap to weapon set 2. It'll proc the curse, and I'll get all the value of these green passives here, which will then snapshot. And then when I go back to casting Essence Drain and doing my other stuff, the curse effect and all these curse scaling nodes were still applied to this Despair, which I casted it with. Now, one thing I will note, a lot of people wonder, hey man, I don't see the animation of my Despair anymore. That's because with these nodes over here, which give you faster curse activation, those combined with the focus curse reduced curse delay makes it an instantaneous proc where the delay just doesn't even occur and the animation doesn't even show. You'll see a little bit of like purple animation on the character, but you won't see the purple circle. The way you know it's still occurring is when you cast it on an enemy, you will see the Despair icon above their head floating around, and you will see the minus 40, 30, however much res, depending on what level the curse is and how much curse effect you have spec'd on the tree, and that's how you know it's still working. Now, after the Despair, we get to another reservation, but instead of being ticked on weapon set 1, it's ticked on weapon set 2, and this is true for both Convalescence and Blink. Our reservations are 4 different reservations: Withering Presence, Convalescence, Blink, and Blasphemy Temp Chains. And if you do the math, you'd say, hey, Lance, that's like 200 spirit to reserve all those things. But here's the thing. You can reserve some on weapon set 2 and some on weapon set 1 and get the benefit of all 4. Why can you get the benefit of all 4? Convalescence and Blink are both cooldown related reservations. What that means is even though I have my wand and my focus out, my weapon set 1, these are still having their cooldown basically transpiring. So for example, if Blink has a 4-second cooldown and I go and I use my Blink, even though I have this weapon set down, the cooldown is still ticking. And in 4 seconds, even though I haven't been playing with my weapon set 2, I can still proc the Blink as if I was holding the weapon set 2 the whole time. So it's very advantageous to save yourself reservation space to put Convalescence and Blink on weapon set 2, so that way you can reserve them without needing any extra spirit and still have the benefit. Now, you can try Convalescence with Ingenuity or Blink. I think this is interchangeable, whether or not you want to have a better a cooldown on your ability to proc recharge for your build or your ability to blink around for extra movement. That is up to you. Personally, I've been trying Convalescence on the I've been trying Ingenuity on Convalescence, and I like that a decent amount for doing harder encounters. Whereas if I'm trying to move throughout maps and just doing general mapping, I like being able to blink more often. You can make that choice for yourself, which one you like more, and that's how those work. One small note I will say is Convalescence has its own keybind. You don't need to think about it. When you press the Convalescence keybind, it will automatically proc. You won't have to manually weapon swap. But for Blink, because Blink is tied to the same keybind as dodge roll, you can't separate and say, hey game, use Blink with this keybind. That's not an option. So in order to do that, I prefer to manually start casting Despair, which the game says, oh, we're swapping the weapons, and you can animation cancel with the Blink. So that'll look a little bit like this, where you didn't really see the weapon swap take place because I animation cancel it by doing the keybind for Blink, and that allows you to do it pretty seamlessly. Just know that while you're mapping, you can say, think I want to blink soon, have it in your head. It's basically like a really quick 2-button press of starting the curse. which you don't really see me doing it. You don't see my character pulling out and doing the curse. You cancel the curse happening by instantly going for the basically the dodge roll keybind. For me, that's spacebar. You can put it to wherever, whatever you want. Now, next up we have Dark Avagee. This is a big elephant in the room for basically, do you want more DPS versus do you want less quality of life? Dark Avagee is just, quite frankly, quite good damage. The thing is, though, it's made of paper, and it dies a lot, and it's kind of annoying to work with. I would say feel it out, see what you like about it, whether or not you like it or not. This is a good thing to do for damage. I'd say it almost doubles our damage in boss fights, just to doing one totem. You can even lean into it and going for 2 totems if you really want to squeeze out a bit more single target. It is good. I'm not personally a totem enjoyer, but even then, I have to admit, it is a good addition to single target when it comes to bosses. This thing is basically a totem that takes advantage of extra ailments on enemies. For example, it shoots additional projectiles at the enemy per ailment. Ignite, Contagion debuff, Essence Drain debuff, Poison. All those things make it shoot more projectiles and deal more damage. So if you want to stack a little bit more of those on, then you can get more damage out of it. For the links, we're running Conk Effect and Venom to inflict poison, which also works with Drain ailments with Essence Drain. We have Control Destruction for hit-based damage. I have Ironwood to make it a little less paper. It still dies a lot. You could also go for the totem placement speed if you want to. And then there is Withering Touch to inflict withers. I'm not convinced this is the correct play. Ultimately, we get to max wither stacks with just Withering Presence alone. So potentially, you could just add another damage link here instead of Withering Presence and just have higher damage. But this also helps you ramp your wither faster. You can test out different things and see what you like. This is just what I went with. I will say one thing, you might be tempted to use Extraction here. I initially tried Extraction with this. The problem is Extraction, it doesn't sacrifice my life as the internal life character, aka it's not a free damage support, because it will sacrifice the totem's life. So it'll drain the totem's life down like to 1 instantly, and then it'll die like that. So you can't use Extraction, but you can use other hit-based damage supports. And then last but not least, you'll notice we have Incinerate here, which is seemingly something that has nothing to do with this character. And quite frankly, that's kind of true. It doesn't really have anything to do with this character, but let me show you what it means or why we have it. So when it comes to this character, we get bonuses out of being low life by Final Barrage, 20% faster casting, and we get 30% faster start of energy shield recharge when not on full life. The thing is, how do I spend this life? How do I make this life number go down? And how do I lock it in place? Well, it's pretty simple. You can either A, take off all your energy shield pieces, like manually take them off, or B, you can swap on a very cheap common item called Vicious of Aya with our helmet. And what this does is it gives us Eldritch Battery, which replaces all of our ES with mana and then allows us to then spend our life. Because Eternal Life, the passive point from Lich, when you have Energy Shield, you can't change your life pool. So what we're doing is we're getting rid of our ES pool so that way we can change our life pool. And on top of that, we're using a channeled skill because we also have a node that says, hey, your non-channeled skills cost Energy Shield, which means with no Energy Shield, you can't spend anything. Like, for example, I can't cast my Essence Drain right now. I'm trying to, but I can't. So the thing we're doing is here, we're grabbing a channeled skill, putting Life Tap on it, and then we are simply spending our life down. This is very intentional. We want this to happen. You can add more support gems onto the channeled skill so that way it spends it faster. But you'll see there, we get it down to 393 life. And then we put on this helmet, and that will lock the energy shield or lock the life in place. You need to be below 35% of your life to be ticked as low life. And this won't change. You'll keep your life number through logouts. Even if you click the well, it won't go up. Like, you can do a lot of things like that. You can level. None of that stuff is going to mess with your life pool. The only way your life gets reset, where you have to redo this part of forcing your life to low life, is if you die. If you die and respawn, you'll be back at full life, and you'll have to redo what I just did here and just showcased. So that's what's going on with this. That's why we have this. The whole purpose is to be able to spend that life down, force the low life option, and that's what that's for. So that goes over all of the gem link options. Hopefully that explains those pretty well for you. Next, we're going to talk about gear priorities. Priority number 1, I'm going to hammer on this repeatedly. It's damage. And damage is gem levels and percent damage scaling. Percent spell and percent chaos. They are interchangeable. They effectively give you the same amount. And you get those stats on your wand. Plus levels goes up to 5. Percent damage can go up to 119 for chaos, 119 for spell, and then like another 40% for a hybrid. Plus levels on amulets can go up to +3. Technically, you can get spell damage on amulets for about 28%, I want to say, or maybe up to 30%. On focuses, you can get up to +2 all, along with, I think you can get 119% chaos and 119% spell damage. I would argue a percent damage focus is probably stronger for you than the ES is, but ES also helps you push a bit more tank. You can make that choice for yourself. And then on top of all of those, you can also get percent chaos on rings, which I don't have on these, but if I had an ideal ring, it would be like cast speed, res, mana regen, life, percent chaos damage. It would be something like that. That's another place you can squeeze some more damage. Outside of those sources, the only other places you can get percent damage on the tree or on the character through gear is percent spell damage or percent chaos on prefix pool of jewels or percent increased wither effect. Those are where you get those for damage scaling. And then the early game of the character, I'd recommend Doedri's gloves for some good percent damage. Late game swapping into rares once you have more percent damage throughout your gear pieces. But that is my recommendations for getting damage. As for getting defense on the character, it is about the flat ES amount. Flat ES on your body armor is your biggest source of ES. This thing can go all the way up to about 1100, maybe even 1200 with a good corruption on a perfect ES chest piece. And then on boots, you could probably get around 300 ES with movement speed. Without movement speed, you could push up to 500 maybe, but I would not suggest going no movement speed. Movement speed is just so limited in places you can get it. Definitely would say movement speed is mandatory or you're going to feel like an absolute snail. And then outside of those two pieces, you can get a bit of ES on your focus and you can get ES on your gloves. That's where you're getting your raw EHP pool. You'll see my chest piece, I take this off, that's 8,000 of my ES. My boots are worth about 2,000 of my ES. My gloves are worth about 2,000 of my ES. The only other source of ES is the helmet. It's Ares Disdain, and that's related to the gain ES is extra, or gain life is extra ES mod. This mod goes from 10 to 15. If you corrupt it, you can get all the way to up to 18%. So that number matters for your ES. And then after that, another tank stat, the bypass mod on this, the higher the bypass mod is, the more damage, basically mitigation you're getting. Because 12% here, 10% on Lich, 5% on the tree, 27% of damage bypasses my ES, hits my life, and does no damage. So it's just raw damage reduction to get that. So that is a rough outline of where you get your damage, where you get your defense. Now let's talk a little bit about utility. Res, you want to get it pretty much everywhere. I think one of my biggest regrets for this character is I didn't end up capping my Chaos Res, and Chaos Res in PoE2 does double damage to Energy Shield, so it's probably one of the most important resistances for me to cap, and I just didn't really get around to it. I wish I got more Chaos Res maybe on my rings or my boots or somewhere, because that was a big mistake for me. Ultimately, you'll see I do have way overcap on Fire Res. That's because if you'll notice at the clip of which I started this video, I was doing a tanking of Arbiter. That was me essentially trying out a setup with extra max Fire Res and anointing this node, which gives max Fire Res based on overcap, which is why I have a ring with so much Fire Res extra that I don't need, which could be reallocated into getting something like Chaos Res. Outside of that, I will recommend as well getting a mana regen rate roll on rings. That's very good for your sustain, as well as flat life when you can get it on things like rings, and belt is a great place to get it. Flat life is where your base mana regen comes from, and the more flat life you have, the better your sustain will be, and the easier it is to sustain casting. Ultimately, I'd probably prefer getting a bit more mana regen on rate on these rings as well, and sacrificing more fire res there too. So that goes over a bit of the gearing. I will say here, you'll notice ingenuity I have on this character. I would strongly stress, as far as min-maxing goes, this should be one of the last things you consider, because it is only marginally better than a rare belt. With its current nerf state, you basically need a perfect roll for it to be better than a rare belt, and it's only marginally better. I obviously did this when I was more min-maxing the character, so keep that in mind. I would suggest upgrading everything else before you consider doing a max rolled ingenuity, unless they just get really cheap for some reason. So yeah, that goes over a bit of the gearing in terms of defenses. In terms of a little bit of utility, I will mention if you get a charm slot, Nascent Hope, proccing your recharge when you get frozen, I like that as a nice little defensive boost. And then I was going to swap one of these out for like a slow or a stun charm, but Removing ignites is a decent defensive layer. I was using it for arbiters. I wanted the ignites for it, but ultimately getting a stun charm or remove slow charms, those will also feel pretty dang good. So yeah, that should go over most of the gearing on the character, but let's talk about real quick jewel slots. Priority stats are percent damage, percent ES for the prefix mods on jewels, and then suffix mods, stuff like stun threshold, skill effect duration, cast speed, mana regenerate, stuff like that where you can fit it is usually a pretty good idea. Wow, I thought this jewel was a lot better. I think I have a better jewel in my stash. I didn't realize I have a much better jewel in my stash. I don't know why I was using this one. I, for whatever reason, thought I swapped the wrong jewel out, it looks like. But anyways, yeah. Those are the stats on jewels you want to look for. And I will say, and I'm going to say this a lot of times, when it comes to this character, heavily suggest using the weighted sum search in each of the gear slot locations and just adjust them based on what you're going for. For example, if you're going to search for gloves, these searches are set up to be on the lower end of power level. The only thing you need to do to adjust the power level of these items is you can increase your weighted sum, which increases the overall value of these stats, as well as for things like gloves, boots, body armor, you can increase the flat minimum amount of ES here, which will just give you a much higher ES result and thus make your energy shield number go up, which is very important for defenses. So yeah, that should cover all the gearing on the character. My throat's getting a little bit worn out, so I guess I should probably wrap this up. This is the Essence Drain Lich. It's pretty much just a 2-button build of Essence Drain Contagion. And then when you get to boss fights, that's when you think about dropping your Sigil of Power. That's when you think about dropping your Curse. That's when you think about dropping your Dark Evan. I don't have the keybind set up because I'm normally playing on controller, and this is the non-Waza setup, so I haven't set up the keybinds for this, but it's pretty much just 2-button build until you run into a boss, and then you add a couple more buttons, which you just initially place to get damage, and then you go Essence Drain, Essence Drain, Essence Drain. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. I hope you guys like it. I hope you guys like the build guide. Hopefully I explained everything well. As always, thanks for watching, Exiles. Take care and have a good one. Peace out, Exiles.